You never forget the moment your dignity gets priced. On camera. I was mid-sentence, walking investors through our international growth pipeline, when Wesley interrupted with a voice that was too smooth to be accidental. Actually, Breyer, before we go further, he said, turning toward the camera like it was his stage. I'd like to share a quick leadership update. I blinked once, just once. Across the screen were 27 investors, camera feeds off, but names lit in corporate fonts: Blackwell Capital, Oberon Ventures, Fieldstream Group, people with money, people we needed. Wesley adjusted his cufflinks like a man preparing for applause. To better align with Ardent Core's evolving priorities, he said, we're streamlining our leadership structure, effective immediately. Breyer's compensation will be adjusted to reflect her narrowed strategic scope. No explanation, no context. Just that word, adjusted. There was a pause. Then, a forced chuckle from someone on the board. Another voice said, "Smart move!" My camera stayed on. So did my smile. Barely. Adjusted. That meant cut in half. 50%. Gone. Like I hadn't carried this company through 2 international contracts and a pandemic pivot. I didn't ask questions. I didn't defend myself. I just stared directly into the camera. Still. Silent. Because behind all the investor names, I spotted one most people wouldn't recognize. El Reyes. Observer only. Muted. No video. But I knew. And I knew he was watching. What Wesley didn't realize was what that name meant to me. He went on, spewing lines about agility, innovation, generational leadership. I said nothing, but every word seared itself into my chest. He thought this moment made him look powerful, like he'd put me in my place. But this call wasn't over, and that face on the screen, that silent box with 2 simple letters, it didn't belong to a passive investor. It belonged to someone who'd spent decades building empires and didn't tolerate public disrespect. So I kept looking into the camera, not blinking, not speaking, letting Wesley dig his own grave, smiling. 2 weeks before the call. It started with a missing email, not an obvious omission, just a Monday morning thread about investor prep. I saw the forwarded version, not the original. No big deal, I told myself. Probably an oversight. By Tuesday, I wasn't on the prep calendar. By Thursday, my slides for the Series E pitch had been replaced. Same content, reshuffled, stripped of the narrative flow I'd spent 2 months crafting. No explanation, no comment, just a quiet overwrite. Like someone slowly erasing your signature from something you created. I asked Wesley about it during our Friday ops review. He smiled and said, "Oh, thought you'd be relieved. You've been under a ton of pressure lately." Then he winked. "I figured we'd give you some space." I didn't say anything, but inside, something cold settled under my ribs. By the following week, rumors had started that I was stepping down, taking a sabbatical, planning an exit after the raise. It was said casually, over espresso machines and hallway chats. No one ever asked me directly, but no one looked surprised either. At first, I blamed myself for not pushing harder. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable, too trusting. But it wasn't comfort, it was exhaustion. I'd spent 6 years pouring my strategy into a company that now felt like it was being vacuum sealed around me. Everywhere I turned, I was still there, my frameworks, my architecture, my numbers. But I was being scraped out of the picture, 1 pixel at a time. The worst part? It was so polite, no confrontation, no backlash, just quiet replacement, like I was an outdated plugin. Then, one night, I got a message on my personal email. Subject line, "You should hear this." It was from Lily, an associate strategy analyst, brilliant kid, quiet, observant. I had mentored her in her first year. Attached was an audio file. I listened once, then twice. Wesley's voice, casual but firm. If Breyer's still at the front of this call, we won't close the round. She makes us look dated. Too legacy. Investors want fresh faces. Gen Z heat. A pause. Then laughter. Male voices. Boardroom confidence. I'm not saying fire her. Just reposition. Ease her out before the cameras roll. I closed my laptop. Not out of rage. Out of precision. They weren't planning to bury me. They were planning to erase me. And now, I had proof. It's strange. The way a memory resurfaces. Not when you miss it, but when something tries to erase it. After hearing Wesley's voice on that recording, calmly planning my disappearance, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stared out my kitchen window and thought about our first office. A sublet warehouse in Emeryville. 5 desks, no heat. 1 espresso machine that never worked. I was 32, and for a while, Ardent Core was just an idea built on algorithm scraps, a whiteboard full of red arrows, and whatever grit I could borrow from caffeine and faith. Wesley didn't show up until year 2. His uncle, the founder, brought him in after a board reshuffle, said he had vision. All I saw was an expensive watch, a smooth voice, and a resume padded with family money. He spent most of his first quarter in marketing brainstorms and TEDx events, while I negotiated our first government contract, an impossible win that came from 3 weeks in D.C., a red-eye flight, and one brutally honest pitch to a skeptical agency chief. He was pitching himself to TechCrunch. But when the deal closed, the article headline read, Ardent Core's Wesley Harlan secures first federal win. No mention of me, not even a line. That was the beginning, and the pattern never stopped. By year 5, Ardent Core was valued at $2.9 billion. I'd built the product roadmap, authored the predictive engine, and architected the crisis response protocols that kept us ahead of every competitor in our space. But in every investor deck, every press release, Wesley stood front and center. I stood behind the camera, adjusting the lighting, tightening his language. I convinced myself it didn't matter. That legacy wasn't built on headlines, but results. Now, I wasn't so sure. 3 nights after the Series E prep call, I got a message on Signal from a number I didn't recognize. It was from one of the quieter board members, Mitchell Tran. He rarely spoke in meetings, but always listened. The message was simple. If you were leading this round, I would have doubled my offer. You built this company. Don't let him rewrite the story. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't validation, it was confirmation of something I had tried too long to deny. That my silence had bought him power. That my humility had made him the hero. And now, they were trying to delete me entirely. Not anymore. The message from Mitchell lingered in my head long after the screen went dark. You built this company. Don't let him rewrite the story. Easier said than done, because the truth is, I let him. I let Wesley take center stage. Let his name fill the headlines. Let his face become the face of Ardent Core. And not because I was weak, because I was hiding. I didn't just choose not to speak up. I chose not to use my name. Most people know me as Breyer Caldwell. Clean, quiet, strategic. But my full name, buried on legal paperwork and quietly omitted from every press mention, is Breyer Reyes Caldwell. Reyes, as in Leonard Reyes, founder of Reyes Blackwell Capital. Net worth, $6.2 billion. Influence, immeasurable. Reputation, sharp, exacting, legendary, and my father. No one at Ardent Core knew. Not Wesley, not the board, not even our legal counsel. I kept it that way on purpose. I never wanted to be the girl with the billionaire father. I didn't want my work filtered through the assumption of inherited advantage. When I joined Ardent Core in its infancy, I told my father only one thing. Let me build something without your shadow. And to his credit, he did exactly that. For years. He never called, never interfered, never so much as referenced the company in interviews. The only thing he asked was that I never use Reyes unless I was prepared for what came with it. I wasn't, not back then, and maybe not even now, but everything changed the moment I saw that name on the series e-call. L. Reyes. Observer only. Muted. Video off. No title. No context. To most. Just another fund rep sitting quietly through the pitch. To me. A blinking red light in the dark. He knew. He had seen what Wesley did. Heard it. Watched me get gutted in real time. Reduced to half a role and half a salary for the crime of being too competent. Had he joined the call out of curiosity? Or was he already planning something? I didn't know, but my stomach churned in knots I hadn't felt since I was a teenager, arguing with him about legacy, independence, and how I didn't want his money or his influence. I wanted to win clean. But now, watching his name hover silently on that screen, I wasn't sure if I had won anything or just survived long enough to lose quietly. And what terrified me more than anything was the thought that maybe, just maybe, I needed him now. The morning after the call, I still got up at 6 o'clock, still dressed in a navy blazer, still clipped my badge to my belt, because technically, I hadn't been fired. No email from HR, no formal documentation, no thank you for your service. Just silence. I told myself I would act normal, go to work, sit at my desk like always. But when I stepped into the lobby at Ardent Core HQ, the building answered for everyone else. My badge didn't work. I tapped once, then again. The little green light that had welcomed me for 6 years glowed red. Behind me, the receptionist glanced up, startled. "Oh, Breyer, just 1 second," she said, already dialing. 2 interns passed through the turnstile with ease. One of them glanced back, but said nothing. I waited. 2 minutes later, HR didn't come down. Neither did anyone from my team. Instead, Megan from front desk leaned forward and whispered, "I'm really sorry. I was told you're to work remotely until further notice. Something about a strategic alignment review." Strategic alignment. I nodded once, jaw tight. "I see. Is that documented somewhere?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. "They didn't say." I stood there for a moment, caught between professionalism and rage. I could have demanded to speak with Wesley. I could have marched up 4 floors and made a scene. But I didn't. Because the worst thing they did wasn't shut me out. It was how quietly they did it. They didn't even need the courage to fire me. Just a closed door and plausible deniability. As I turned to leave, I caught a familiar glance. Kaylee, our summer strategy intern. The same one Wesley once called too soft for analytics. She was standing by the copier, lips pressed together, clearly watching. She didn't approach me, she didn't say a word. But as I passed the side hallway near the lockers, she stepped out and slipped something into the pocket of my coat, like she was handing off a parking stub. Then she walked away. When I got back to my car, I pulled it out. A USB drive, no label, at home. I plugged it in. Inside, pitch deck backups, internal notes, updated investor lists, and admin-level system links Wesley had forgotten to revoke. They thought I was out, but I was still watching, and now. I wasn't just isolated, I was collecting. I didn't cry. Not after the investor call, not when my badge turned red, not even when Megan whispered the phrase strategic alignment review like it was an obituary. But when I sat in my apartment later that evening, coat still on, lights still off, staring at the USB drive from Kaylee glowing in my laptop, something inside me locked into place. Not grief, not anger, something sharper, clarity. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to storm back into the building or send a scorched earth email. What I needed was precision. And the one person who understood that better than anyone was my father. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not because we fought, but because I'd asked for distance. Years ago, when I started at Ardent Core, I told him I wanted to make something real on my own terms. No favors, no shortcuts. And to his credit, he gave me exactly what I asked for. But now he needed to see what they were doing to his daughter, not because she was his daughter, but because she was the architect of a company that was slowly erasing her name. So I drafted the message carefully. No emotion, no commentary, just a short subject line. For your review. No action yet. I attached the clip of Wesley slashing my salary mid-call audio of him telling the board I was too legacy to land the round screenshots of internal documents I'd authored, now bearing his name, the revised Series E pitch deck, including my original slide structure, repurposed word for word at the bottom. I wrote one sentence. Let him show you who he is. Please don't interfere yet. And then I hit send. The reply came 12 minutes later. Not from him. From Lisette, his longtime assistant. Sharp as glass. Always precise. Never overuses punctuation. El Reyes has received and reviewed. Confirmed for Series E final call. Video off. Mic muted. Listening only. No response planned at this time. My breath caught. Not because I was surprised, but because I knew exactly what that meant. My father didn't need to enter a room to control it. He just had to be present. And his presence alone changed everything. Back at Ardent Core, Wesley was probably celebrating, probably drafting press copy about his refined executive vision and modernized team realignment, probably rehearsing every line he'd deliver to investors to make himself sound decisive, bold, and in control. He had no idea what or who was watching, and that was the best part. This wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't a confrontation in a boardroom. It was a quiet trap, one Wesley had already walked into, because the one man in that call who could kill a deal with a single nod was already there, waiting. He delivered it like he'd written every word himself. In the uploaded rehearsal video labeled Final Run CEO EDEC. Wesley stood in the center of the conference room, pacing confidently between two vertical displays. His voice was smooth, pauses practiced, gestures measured. The same charismatic performance I'd watched 100 times before in investor meetings. Only this time, the script wasn't his. It was mine. I sat at my kitchen table, watching through the secure link Kaylee's USB had unlocked. Every single sentence he spoke, every projection, market trajectory, scalability ratio. It was the same language I had crafted over weeks of research, drafting, redlining, and revisions no one else stayed late to complete. But in his mouth, it sounded like spin, like repackaged confidence. This is where we pivot from static modeling to adaptive threshold forecasting, he said, clicking through to slide 14, and that's when I saw it. Adaptive threshold modeling. 2 R's. A double letter. A typo only I ever made, because I type too fast, and spell check doesn't catch nested words inside shapes. I froze. That typo had survived 6 internal approvals, 6 pairs of eyes, including Wesley's own, had missed it. They hadn't even cared enough to understand what they were stealing. It wasn't just theft, it was lazy theft. My stomach churned. I paused the video and zoomed in. Threshold. It stared back at me like a wound still open. Proof not only that the pitch was mine, but that no one in his so-called revamped leadership team even knew how the engine we were pitching actually worked. I could have laughed if I weren't so disgusted. Over the next hour, I documented every element of that slide deck. I opened a folder on my desktop titled Proof Series E Fraud. Inside, I dropped screenshot of the slide, date-stamped copy of my original draft from 3 weeks ago. Internal Slack thread between me and product on the modeling system. My calendar record confirming I authored the framework. I added a note under the image. Only person who ever spelled it, threshold, me. Then I hit play again, on screen. Wesley breezed through the closing summary, grinning like the hero of a story he didn't write. The room around him, PR lead, legal counsel, and a junior strategist, nodded along, oblivious. None of them challenged a word. None asked where the data came from, because they didn't want truth. They wanted momentum. I didn't send a message, didn't log into Slack, didn't so much as breathe a word to anyone. Why would I? He'd already pressed record. He'd already sealed it in time. And when the investors saw it, along with one particular observer who never missed spelling errors, I wouldn't need to say anything. Because the moment Wesley read that word aloud, with pride and fake authority, he'd expose himself. And all I had to do was hit capture. By the time the Series E call began, Wesley had already rehearsed it 43 times. I knew, because I'd watched every version, rehearsal videos, voice memos, even test clips with his executive coach. He had crafted this performance like a symphony, one where he played every instrument and conducted the spotlight. And yet, as the actual call began, something felt brittle. The virtual conference room buzzed with silent power. 26 squares lit the screen. Some camera on, most camera off. The usual suspects, senior analysts from Cormont, reps from Blackwell Global, the stoic observer from Pacific Gate Partners, and buried among them, L. Reyes, muted, camera off. I watched from home. Unseen. Wesley began the pitch smoothly. He stood alone in Ardent Core's polished boardroom. Tie off, blazer on. Sleeves rolled to mid-forearm in that casual dominance look his stylist insisted made him more founder-forward. He spoke of momentum. He spoke of recalibration. He spoke of future-centric verticals and streamlined leadership realignment. I counted 3 buzzwords per sentence. Every line was curated, every smile measured. The screen flickered with engagement emojis and polite acknowledgments. No one questioned him, until they did. At exactly 22 minutes in, a square lit up, camera on, mic live. The speaker, Elliot Karstens, managing partner at Blue Point Venture Capital, a man known for direct questions and zero tolerance for rehearsed nonsense. "Quick question," he said, leaning slightly forward. "This is impressive, Wesley, no doubt. But one thing, where's Breyer?" The silence that followed was total. You could hear a metaphorical pin drop across 26 networks and 3 continents. I froze. Wesley's face twitched, just for a second. Not enough for an amateur to catch, but I caught it. His mouth opened, then closed. "Well," he began, voice a touch thinner than before. "As part of our organizational refresh, Breyer has transitioned out of a frontline role. She's taken on more of an advisory capacity, and we felt that for today's narrative. It made sense to highlight emerging leadership." Elliot blinked. "She led the modeling framework, right?" Wesley nodded. "She contributed, of course. But we're pivoting now, toward younger energy, a leaner, more aggressive profile." Aggressive. That word stuck. Then came the mistake. Someone else, Talia from Ironmark Capital, jumped in. "Sorry, just to clarify, did Breyer resign?" Wesley hesitated. A pause. A flash of something in his eyes. Hesitation. Calculation. Maybe fear. "She no longer aligns with our strategic direction, but we're grateful for her foundation work." Foundation work. I could practically feel the blood in my ears. That's when it happened. The silent square in the top right corner flickered. L. Reyes. Mic on. His voice sliced through the call like cold steel. "I'd like to respond." A beat. Everyone froze. The digital room recalibrated. A name that had stayed quiet in 2 rounds of funding. Now speaking. "Please," said Wesley. His voice suddenly strained. Leonard Reyes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I've listened closely to today's presentation," he said. "And I must admit, I found it fascinating especially the omission of the person who built the very system you're now using to secure $1.3 billion in capital. No one dared interrupt. He continued, measured and merciless. Breyer didn't contribute. She designed, she architected, she enabled every metric you're presenting. I sat back, pulse racing, hardly breathing. And if your vision of leaner, younger, and more aggressive means cutting out the only executive whose intellect I actually trusted, he paused. Then I believe this fund will be better allocated elsewhere. The silence turned nuclear. In less than 5 seconds. 2 investors dropped from the call. Then 3. Wesley turned pale. The entire pitch he built, on my work, my words, my silence, was collapsing. Not with a fight, not with shouting. Just one sentence from the wrong man to underestimate. And I didn't have to say a word. Leonard Reyes didn't have to raise his voice. He spoke with the kind of calm that made everyone else lower theirs. After nearly 30 minutes of Wesley's empty confidence and corporate theater, the most powerful man on the call finally unmuted. "I've listened," Leonard said evenly, "and what I heard was a presentation built on metrics designed by someone who is no longer welcome at her own company." His voice wasn't angry. It was still, deadly still. Wesley tried to smile. "Leonard, we appreciate your—" "I'm not finished." 4 words. That's all it took to silence Wesley mid-sentence. Leonard continued. "Breyer Caldwell is the reason I approved this deal. Not because she's my daughter, though she is, but because she's the only one in this room who understands what Ardent Core actually does. Without her, this isn't a company I believe in. It's a performance. And I don't invest in performances." He paused. Let it land, then added, "Reyes Blackwell Fund is withdrawing all participation, effective immediately." It took 5 seconds for the first ripple. Reyes Blackwell, $450 million gone. The screen stayed quiet. Then a blink. A tile dropped. Stonewell Partners. Another $200 million vaporized. 3 more faces disappeared within the next minute. But it was Hiro Tanaka of Kaizumi Capital who delivered the next blow. His video feed flicked on. His background, a sparse white Tokyo office. "We conducted an audit after noticing inconsistencies," he said plainly. "What we found were projected numbers, not matching internal reports." He dropped a PDF into the Zoom chat. "Discrepancy analysis, Q2. Wesley's face twitched. I opened the file. It was damning. Highlighted rows of misreported revenue, valuation padding, timeline manipulation. Slides Wesley had pitched were built on sand. And suddenly, the silence wasn't professional. It was dangerous. For a moment, no one spoke, not even Wesley. Even his smile had collapsed into that thin-lipped look of someone calculating exits. Then a soft notification pinged in the corner of the call window. Private message, J. Albrecht. Fenro Equity, Germany. If Breyer Caldwell is not reinstated by EOQ, we will withdraw interest. No further discussion. There it was. My name. Pulled back into the center of a deal they tried to force me out of. No speech, no press release, just a line of text and a $130 million ultimatum. The board stayed frozen. Emma from comms unmuted, trying to deflect, citing narrative shift and executive clarity, but no one listened anymore, because the illusion was broken, not shattered by rage, but unraveled by silence. Truth, and 37 measured words from a man who never needed to shout. I watched it all from my living room. No makeup, hair in a low bun, coffee gone cold beside me. And for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. This wasn't vengeance. It was vindication, and the quiet reclaiming of power they never truly understood. The ocean never asked questions. That's why I found myself staring at it that evening, sitting beside my father on the low stone wall that edged the quiet northern stretch of the bay. Same spot we used to visit when I was 14. Back when I still called him Leonard just to push his buttons. Back when I thought needing anyone made me weak. We hadn't spoken since the call. There wasn't much left to say. The fallout had happened in waves. Wesley's pitch collapsed. Ardent Core's funding round officially stalled. Legal teams moved into motion. The board sent me an apology statement so carefully written. It almost sounded sincere. Wesley hadn't been fired yet, but the countdown had begun. And me. I felt light, not triumphant, not vengeful, just cleared, like I had finally stopped fighting to prove I existed. My father handed me a folder without a word. Thick paper, black tab. My initials on the cover, BRC. Inside, a new term sheet, an offer from him. You lead, I fund, 100% autonomy, 0% interference. One condition, he added, looking out over the water. This time, use your full name. I ran my fingers across the top of the document. My signature line was blank, but typed above it were the words, Briar Reyes Caldwell, Managing Partner, Reyes Forward Ventures. He wasn't asking me to lean on his name. He was asking me to accept mine. It took me longer than I expected to find the words. 15 years of pride, of distance, of refusing help even when I was drowning, suddenly melting into a moment where I was finally allowed to say the thing I hadn't said since college. Thank you, I whispered, voice catching in my throat. Then quieter, like I was afraid the ocean would judge me. Dad! He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just nodded once, like he'd been waiting for that word longer than he ever let on. That night, I signed the term sheet, not out of spite, not for revenge, but because I was finally ready to build something without hiding who I was. This time, there would be no ghostwriting, no aliases, no standing in someone else's shadow while they took credit for my light. I'd write my name at the top of the deck, not just the footer. The company I would build wouldn't be perfect, but it would be mine. And that was enough.